Um, Thank you very much for joining the LGMA August webinar towards COP28. We'll just give a couple of minutes for all our colleagues to settle down in order to kick off the agenda. So we appreciate your patience. Thank you. So I think we can consider that most of our colleagues have settled down. So Well, once again, a warm welcome from ICLA Local Governments for Sustainability. My name is Jim Sarikan. I'm the Director of Global Advocacy, and ICLA is conducting this webinar in its capacity as the focal point of the local governments and municipal authorities constituency. This is one of the monthly webinars. It is recorded, and then the recording and the presentation is made available on our homepage. During the webinar, we invite you to stay tuned to the presentations, but anytime you can type in the Q&A box your points or comments. And if there is any a burning issue, you can also raise your hand so we can also let you in. But we believe there's a value on going through the whole presentation in its entirety and then open the floor for participation. As usual, we have a certain agenda. This month we have some specific themes. But just overall, we will be having an overview for those who are joining us new. Normally, we track what has happened in the past and discuss the upcoming event. But this time, we will start with a kind of an ecosystem of who is who in our subnational advocacy, because it's getting really proliferated in a positive sense. There are so many actors, and then we'll also go through this 100 days to go. What are the key things? And there are several elements of our preparations. Uh, we will also spend some time on the Stocktake, and we will also conclude with inputs from our colleagues from Cities Biodiversity Center, Ingrid. She will provide us updates from the National Biodiversity Agenda, the latest updates from this sister process, let's say. Um, those who remember, just a reminder, the LGMA is the voice of towns, cities, and regions in the UN process since '95. Particularly, we are active in our advocacy since 2007, when there was an effort for renewal of the climate regime, which in fact concluded its first replenishment, more or less, in the Paris Agreement, where we managed to get recognition of all levels of governments. And since then, our engagement became much more active. And there in the Glasgow, we have managed to insert the urgent need for multi-level and cooperative action. And in fact, this is why we are much more excited, because when the COP28 will be opening a new era of climate action, taking building on the stocktake of the experience from the Paris Agreement, we believe multi-level action and urbanization will become the new normal if we are serious to raise the ambition. LGMA has been, especially on virtual platforms, very active. We have this webinars monthly. In addition to that, we have monthly bulletins since the beginning of the year. We have specific working groups on adaptation, finance, loss and damage finance. Several LGMA partners are leading this. And we also have a WhatsApp group for coordination. At the beginning of the year, we have built on our achievements in COP27. Especially, we said that we will focus on surge, we will focus on stocktake, and we will enhance our engagement throughout the year, where we said Daring Cities Forum in Bonn, overlapping with UNFCCC and UN Habitat Assembly, will be a milestone event. And in fact, this was a particular opportunity for us to make progress there. Obviously, we are talking about a process led by presidencies or the UN the climate members, climate convention parties, and the presidency. we have every year specific assignments, officially president and high-level champion, and we're trying to also have in each presidency a focal point for our coordination point. And in that sense, we have Asif Nawaz Shah, who was our guest last month. But we're also in touch with a number of other officials, including the youth champion and domestic coordinator and climate action champion, in addition to COP president as well. This is also part of our roadmap that we are tracking our engagement through three main elements, three main streams. Let's say we are following the UNFCCC or UN agenda, which is noted in blue. We are following the global and national agendas like G7, Urban 7, oh, sorry, G7 and G20, which are noted in red. And then we have the LGMA agenda, which is our real events that our colleagues are responsible for convening this, and therefore we are rather paused in this process. And I have to correct that. The green is the UN and UNFCCC, the black is the global, and red is the LGMA related agendas. So here is our most important agenda that we will cover this webinar. I would be very happy, of course, to hear colleagues also who are involved in this process to provide updates as appropriate. This chart is trying to symbolize our ecosystem of subnational advocacy. The reason is officially, of course, LGMA is the main channel, which has been a process to the negotiations, with the agenda items, and that is usually conducted by our annual strategies and the position papers. And throughout the year, we also engage in several workshops. We participate in the opening and closing of the official sessions and provide interventions. We have our own multi-level action pavilion, and this year we are focusing on Stocktake for climate emergency. As we said, these are all under our authority. We decide on modalities. We assign our coordinators and which topics we will discuss with. The topic of multi-level has become, and urbanization has become a hot issue. On the left side of the screen, you see in the blue, the process is led by UN and UN Secretary General and UN Climate Change Secretariat. We have others on the extreme right hand of it, on the yellow box. There are several experts or institutions who are participating in this process. And the newest, let's say, more visible one is the green area, which is the process that by COP28 presidents and Bloomberg Philanthropies, especially with their partnership announced on the 9th of March this year. This has its own really specific momentum, and we will touch upon this as well. And beneath this, actually, there are two important processes that we are very excited that is evolving. And this is the uniqueness because it's a kind of a combination of our joint efforts with numerous partners, especially at the UN space. The first one is the SURGE initiative that you all remember. It was a milestone achievement that it was for the first time urbanization as a concept was introduced based on its joint vision of 5 thematic areas, but also emphasizing the need for multi-level action. And this process is being recognized not just at the first ever Urban and Climate Ministerial in COP27, but this year, UN Habitat Assembly also welcomed this initiative and it's encouraged the UN member states, both in the Habitat Assembly and in the UNFCCC, to continue such practices. So we are confident that this will become a regular agenda, especially knowing that presidency, both COP27 and COP20 are very keen to continue on that. And the second element is the UNFCCC Friends of Multi-Level Action, which is a process that we are leading or trying to facilitate since 2013. This is the national governments who are working with us on specific agendas, both at home, but also at the UNFCCC space. These are, of course, the delegations of UNFCCC negotiations, which is mainly ministers of environment or ministers of climate, but we also have a broad base for that. And in that sense, this community is also evolving or dynamic because in depending on the priorities of the nations, the multi-level agenda can be going up in the higher in the agenda of those countries, or it could be a positive agenda, or it can be agenda that they may not be very much interested based on the politics of the current administration of the national federal government. Therefore, it's also a space that is very exciting, but of course dynamic. And remember, this is uh, the representing the nations, not necessarily the LGMA as such. Um, on the NDC, on the others processes, there are things that is evolving in the last couple of months and even years. Uh, one element is NDC partnership. It's a process that kicked off in 2017, and ICLE became one of the first associate members, in fact, one of the first. It is a process that brings ministers of climate with other ministries, especially planning and finance and other line ministries like agriculture or transport. It has been it played an instrumental role on the way to Glasgow because NDC partnership, the Climate and Action and Enhanced Package, played a huge role in the global south for some of the countries to raise their ambition on the way to Glasgow, and that played a very valuable example of the value of such partnerships. And they are also among those that we primarily and proudly represent or acknowledge their role in this process, such as Dominican Republic, such as Rwanda, and many others. We have a process led by UN Habitat, UNDP, United Nations Development Program, and Southern Denmark University, which is a tracking of the industries through their urban components. There have been twice an analysis on that, and that has become also a good reference point. And this is mainly tracking the NDCs based on how they have acknowledged urban development in their processes, not necessarily tracking who has been doing this, which is it's not addressing the multi-level component, but it's rather how urbanization is incorporated in that. And as we have noted, the first NDCs after Paris Agreement or before Paris Agreement has around 60% of the NDCs with the relative component of urbanization there. And we have seen this figure going to 64% in the Glasgow submissions. We have G7 playing an important role since last year because they have started to acknowledge their Urban 7 and multi-level is a topic that is really very hot, very intensively discussed. One new element is that for the first time ever, G7 ministers of environment have announced that they will convene a subnational roundtable with Urban 7. This will be the first of its kind, and this is part of our agenda that you will see next one. We have regional urban forums that is connected to our discussion with, of course, UN Habitat, and obviously we have several initiatives at the national and global level. For example, EU has its own initiatives, Japan has its own initiatives. We have just heard about BRICS Urbanization Forum, and an example again, US Cities Summit. These are type of processes that helps us to elevate these processes. The notion of urbanization, multi-level action, and engagement role on regional governments. If we look at the UNFCCC space, as we said, with Marrakech Partnership as the action agenda, we have numerous entry doors. We have adaptation and breakthrough agendas. There are human settlements references, and there are expectations that buildings will be one of the breakthroughs. Race to Zero, Race to Resilience has kicked off in Glasgow. Obviously, this is a commitment and it's a campaign to encourage the cities and regions to announce their commitments for climate neutrality and resilience. We have thematic pathways. One of them is human settlements. And now it's a new agenda coming up with solution pathways. Obviously, it is important that these procedures are feeding to each other appropriately rather than creating additional let's say, concepts that are not that are not relevant to each other and relevant to our own process. That's our goal, that these speak to each other and these support our goal as LGMA. Under the champions process, there is also the regional climate weeks, which is becoming much more institutionally well structured, where track 2 is announced as cities, urban and rural development and infrastructure. And we as LGMA have been very actively involved in that. The UN Secretary General is running climate ambition summits. The first one has been the 2007, 2014, and 2019. Especially the last two, we have been engaged with the Covenant of Mayors process, as well as the ICLA track was an important process that elevated our voice. For this year's summit, and let's remember, this is an initiative of the Secretary General. It is every 4 years, and each time it has its own priorities, and we will touch upon this. This time there is a spatial accountability framework and checklist, and that will shape our engagement in this process. So I left the last box, the green one, to the end, because in fact, all these numerous initiatives, processes are now, hopefully, will be much stronger, let's say, coordinated, or let's say, complementing each other, because COP28 presidency, as early as at the beginning of the year, announced that they would like to have a strong component of multi-level action in their process. It's one of the first time that a COP presidency has a sustainable city strategy, which also includes our regions as well. Following this process over these like more than 15 years on behalf of ICLA, and even 20 years plus on the UNF space, as far as I know, this is the first time the president has such a concrete vision. And we have heard from Asif last month that is mainly focusing on three areas, to have a negotiated outcome from the climate COP28 and global Stocktake processes, to introduce a new momentum for finance, and to accelerate climate action implementation initiatives. So, of course, these, especially the outcome for a negotiated outcome with a commitment from nations, is something that is not easy to achieve, and that's why now we're very happy to have the support from Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg, former New York mayor, C40 president, and the UN Special Envoy for Cities. And his initiative is helping us, because this bridging all the LGMA, UN initiatives, and other partner initiatives could be now they can all be much more encouraged if there is such a solid leadership. And there will be several mechanisms for that. The first one will be that there will be first ever local action summit during the World Climate Summit on the first 2 days of the summit of COP28. And then this will be followed by the first time a new concept, which is multi-level action, urbanization, built environment / transport. The terminology is always important. Originally, it was always cities and regions. Now you can see it is speaking about multi-level action, which acknowledges what has been achieved in Glasgow Climate Pact. It acknowledges urbanization, which acknowledges also what has been in Sharm el-Sheikh with the urban and climate ministerial, and built environment, a very specific theme, and transport also has a strong urban component. So we are very happy that these now machineries will now be like really working like a clock. Just each arc is feeding to the other, so that we conclude COP28, where we will kick off a new era with multi-level action, and urbanization is a strong element. So the last 100 days, it's more or less like the last 100 meters of a marathon in the UN space, will be the most defining moments in the next, which will shape our success and achievements in Dubai and beyond. This 100 days was also highlighted by the presidency last week. Obviously, we are even less than 100 days now. Today, we will be having our own discussions, and tomorrow we will also release our next bulletin, LGMA bulletin. But September will be a very hectic. It will start with Africa Regional Climate Week. We will touch upon this. On the same dates, we will have Pacific Urban Forum. These are, once again, the blues are the ones that are by UN. Around the Africa Regional Climate Week, on the same day of LGMA session, we will announce our Stocktake support for Global South. In the week after, we will have our webinar on how to local Stocktake. And on the 15th of September will be critical moment that the submission will be submitted to UN, especially on Stocktake outputs and adaptation. On this important agenda, 18, 19, 20 September, will be both SDG Summit and Climate Summit. We will touch upon this. A week after, we will have, again, an LGMA-led process, Urban Shift Asia Forum. It will be in India. That will also be supported by a wrapping of our achievements and our webinar in the end of month and bulletin. October is starting also with the Urban October, World Habitat Day, and we will also release the 10 cities or regions who will be supported under the Stocktake process. We will have the first, we will have the European and Northern, let's say Western European countries regional UN mechanism, which is called UNEC Mayors Forum in Vienna, in Geneva. We will have the G7 Roundtable on Subnational Climate Action. This will be virtual. It will be held, led by the Japanese presidency, but it will bring the G7 nations, plus the Urban 7 will have delegation part of it. On the same days, an LGMA-led process will be taking place in Malaga, or high-level dialogue on finance. The rest of the processes of the month of October is very much UN-led. We have Regional Climate Week in the Middle East and North Africa region. We have in Abu Dhabi the Global Stocktake Workshop, Outcomes Workshop. We will have Regional Climate Week of Latin America and Caribbean. And in similar date, we will have Asia Pacific Urban Forum in Suwon. The point that we should remember is that the regional climate weeks are the ones that gathers ministers of climate, whereas urban forums are the ones that gathers ministries of urbanization or public housing. So it is good that we have agendas in both of those so that these discussions then prepare our delegations when they reach the COP28 in Dubai, that they end up annually with this ministerial meeting on urbanization and climate change, so that this becomes more systematic. We will again have our monthly webinar and bulletin in the beginning of in end of October. There is a unique event by European Union. Obviously, European Union Cities and Regions Week or European Union Regions Week is happening every year in October. But for the first time ever, a UN party, UNFCCC party, is voluntarily convening a Stocktake. Stocktake process is presumably be held in the UNFCCC space, but we have managed to open the floor that is local and international process can also feed in. So EU is one of the few UNFCCC parties who will have a Stocktake, and therefore we are very excited that many of our European cities are also involved in this process. We wish to be visible there, and we will also bring results from our Stocktakes, for example, be it Glasgow, be it Utrecht or others that will come up in the days to come. The month of October, which is Urban October, will be concluded with pre-COP28 in Abu Dhabi. That will be the ministerial meeting, and we will have 2 seats there as LGMA. The nice coincidence that this pre-COP28 is overlapping with the World Cities Day. And those who can remember, in Glasgow, the first day of COP26 was kicking off with the World Cities Day. So, in fact, this Urban October is by a nice coincidence giving us an opportunity to highlight the connection between urban space and the climate action through this kind of interesting overlapping events, and that will empower our engagement. The month of November is relatively calm, let's say. Obviously, everybody's back at home having their final capitals consultation at the capitals and wrapping up their delegations. We will have the Regional Climate Week Asia Pacific in Malaysia, and we will also conclude our webinars. Throughout this process, we will have Stocktakes for climate emergency. We'll discuss about that. And obviously, we will also prepare for our agenda at the multi-level action pavilion. One important point on the way forward is how we shape our inputs to the process as collectively as LGMA. Those who were involved in the previous webinars and they're receiving our bulletins, they can remember that there has been an effort by partners, Regions for Committee of the Regions, under the coalition, and we have been supporting this process as ICLE, as local government systems, as the focal point of LGMA. This aims to give basic understanding of what we ask or what we vision uh, for the discussions that will come on the table at COP28. But it's not just a negotiation position. As far as I can see, the value of this position, of course, in the past, we also had our positions about time for multi-level action delivers. But this is, if you have noticed, the topics are touching almost all agenda items of climate action. And especially the part two is also making it very much specific to the negotiation topics. So the first part is much more thematic or vision or political expectations, whereas the second part is much more to the negotiation process. I think this message is not only towards the parties, but also towards to the local governments to acknowledge that, look, climate agenda is not just mitigation, it's not just adaptation, it has all elements, the means of implementation, climate justice, that this is why we have to be able to speak about all the agenda items, about our positions and how we implement, how we wish to implement, and what we expect from national governments, but what we can bring to the table through our own plans and activities. So I believe this is a very good effort and practice that will guide both our members and partners, but also the UNFCCC community, and not just the parties, but also the secretariat, but also the stakeholders, knowing that Paris Agreement also specifically envisages role for different state non-party stakeholders. So our colleagues who have been leading in the drafting of this process, you can see the in this link, and Kata, I think we are able to share the position paper for this in the chat box so that uh, you can see this. Kata, if you can send this link to everyone. Yes, you have sent already. This position paper has already been reviewed by partners. We have received input, and some inputs are still being finalized. The original idea was to open this for endorsement in September and announce the first signatories during the Climate Week New York. I am not sure how much we will be able to announce the endorsement on during the climate week, because I think there are some paragraphs that we are still have to agree on some details. I do not want to commit that now because our colleagues, Committee of the Regions, Undertook Coalition, and Region 4, and they are not in this call yet because of summertime continuing still. I'm not expecting too much changes, but very likely that the more practical, let's say, road to go could be that during the New York Climate Week, we can announce the document and open it for endorsement from New York City Climate Week onwards. That can give us more flexibilities, and then we can make the final endorsement list by COP28 or before COP28. That could be a scenario that we can consider. So feel free to make your final remarks in this document. Be aware, most of the topics are already consolidated. There are some very, very minor, but it's not changing too much of the spirit of this document. And I'm sure we will end up with a nice result for that. Yes, this is the overall agenda. Immediate agenda is Africa. Africa Climate Week is important. It's the first of the series, and it's also Africa is the time when we will be having also the Africa Climate Week. Although we are not directly involved in the negotiations of the ministers, there will be opportunities of interaction, and we are proud that track 2 will be open through an event led by LGMA and Common of Mayors of Saharan Africa, which gives the confidence of the UN partners of our constituency. Track 2 involves three other events, and there are different partners from UNEP, from SLOCAT, because the track 2 is more than local and regional governments. But we are very proud that we for this one we are taking the lead, and I'm very happy to announce that Dr. Mohiuddin will be joining us from COP28 presidency. Dr. Adnan Amin will be joining us, and there will be numerous lineup, including your Habitat Executive Director will be joining us, and a number of African mayors and governors across Africa, North, South, East, West, will be there. And other than this first opening event, there will be engagement in other track events, as well as side events will be convened by LGMA partners. I personally was not able to find the full list of side events. We can check with our colleagues in Africa or UNFCCC whether there is a full list available publicly, and we can share this in the upcoming updates in our mailings or in the bulletin as well. UN Climate Ambition Summit. We discussed this last month, and this chart, as you have seen, is the essence of what will be discussed. This is a structure that is crafted by UN Secretary General, that they want ambition commitments to be strengthened. They want all these commitments to be credible, that they are transparent and accountable, and they want implementation commitments. The way the summit is designed, as we have said before, the way in 2007 was different, 2014 was different, 2019 was different. Here, the UN Secretary General has requested that access, which means participation in the summit itself, especially from the non-party stakeholders' part positioning, will depend whether those who will be in the room are ready to fill a checklist that has been designed to deliver the implementation of its high-level expert group report on integrity. And we will go through this checklist in the next slide, but just wanted to flag this. It has a certain logic. The UN Secretary General wants the ones who are the most advanced on their own climate commitments to be visible. And they say that this space is only for those who comply with this criteria. As I said, this has a certain logic and we have to respect. Access to the UN during this day, 20th of September, obviously is always a challenge. It's restricted because of the high-level protocols. And as far as we know, it's also limited to special invitations. As of today, we don't know how this invitation process is speeding up. We also have to be aware the Climate Action Summit is part of the UN High-Level Week, which means the beginning of the week, especially with the weekend onwards, there is this SDG Summit preparations, SDG Summit weekend on the weekend, and the real SDG Summit on Monday and Tuesday, which has a completely different mechanism for action. In our case, this is coordinated by our colleagues in the UCLG who are managing the Global Task Force. So on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, access to the UN will be very unique. And on Wednesday, participation to the Climate Summit will also be unique. So we all have to be prepared for this reality. But UN High-Level Week is always an opportunity for engagement. Inside and outside, there are numerous events. Of course, Climate Week New York City is a brand developed by the Climate Group, one of the very champions on the climate action from the business community. And so many of our partners, sister, brother organizations are actively involved. There will be official opening. On Sunday, there will be an End Fossil Fuel March in New York City, and there will be events inside and outside UN. We are aware of several events that are led by LGMA partners. We will be hoping to share our list that we are aware of in the next couple of days. We are aware there will be some ministerial meetings, and these will be possibly that there may be some representation depending on how they are structured. And in case you would like to to share your events details on the climate summit, feel free to share with us. On the SDG summit, we will be working with UCLG to track what is the global task force agenda in this process. And here comes this checklist. The link that is this is publicly available checklist now. The UN Secretary General says that anyone who wants to comply, download this checklist, read through, and inform me whether you are able to respond to this question. It has been built around 10 topics of the high-level expert group. The interesting thing is that Race to Zero and the UNSCC Race to Zero guidance documents have already prepared a certain background on how to track accountability of the climate neutral commitments. The important thing of this checklist is that it goes beyond what is required or what is recommended by the Race to Zero process. It has additional elements, additional points, additional details that has not been necessarily addressed by Race to Zero. This checklist includes several questions that are really voluntary. There are no global processes to guide this process. That's why everyone's understanding may be different. This is particularly in the case of Scope 3 emissions. This is particularly important in the use of offsets. This is particularly different in the way you define your transition plan. That's what UNFCCC, UN Secretary General is asking. And the checklist does not highlight how the respondents will be assessed, which means what is the threshold, minimum threshold, to be eligible to be accepted to the UN Climate Ambition Summit? What is the percentage of yes, and how would you accept if it is like 75%, or which ones are bare minimum that if you do not respond yes to this, even the rest is done, you will not be eligible to this. So that doesn't exist. So we have tried to clarify this kind of very fine details with the UN Secretary General's office. However, we haven't received any response back yet. We also would like to check how this will be followed up. There are rumors that this checklist is only for the summit, but we don't think that it will be just staying there. There will be a further spin-off effect or spillover effect into the rest of the UN accountability framework, and UNFCCC already started to prepare for that. So it's important, especially for those cities, even in the global north, we are aware in regions that they may not have the full answers or the solutions to the questions that are asked. And especially, most of the time, it's not that they don't want to act on these things, but it is rather either there's no appropriate global coordinated guidance, or there's no financial and technical capacity for that. So those who have been believing in these ideas but not able to deliver due to several reasons, how they will be acknowledged in the summit itself or in the process, or especially more importantly, how they will be receiving support to help them to deliver this. It's not clear, and we wish this to be acknowledged and addressed as quick as possible in order to ensure inclusivity of this process. So that is not just only those who are able to do it, but it's also for those who wish to do it but are not able to do it because lack of certain baseline infrastructure. Just be aware there is a certain number of LGMA partners who have been dealing with this checklist, and they have come up with some suggestions. It is not officially communicated to the UN Secretary General's office yet, but we know it could have been improved, or if this checklist is improved, it will be much easier for cities and regions to respond into this process. So this is a complex process, and it's relatively unknown for many of the details. So we will be staying tuned to check what's going on. Let's speed up and then getting to the end of our discussions. I'm sorry that it is so long by only one man speaking, but I appreciate your interest and patience for that. President Temeke, this is not new, absolutely new. It was shared last month. The good news, the second ministerial meeting on urbanization climate is confirmed. That's what we heard from presidency. And I see my colleague Leah from UNEP is also here. Maybe she can provide update on that. The important thing is that for pre-COP, we will have 2 seats. And for the presidency, there is an important announcement that they will fund 3 LGMA participants from the LDCs and SITs to the COP28 for travel and accommodation. And we will be happy to receive your nominations for that. The global stocktake is advancing. There is an overview report released. There is a good references to urbanization multi-level action. Other than stocktake, we are discussing with loss and damage. The observer and participation to loss and damage finance is relatively blocked, which is a very concern for all of us. Our colleagues from Regions 4, they have shared their global bond adaptation. For stocktake for climate emergency, you can see our new brand and new vision that we are promoting this as both for local and all levels of subnational governments could be part of it. In fact, we are positioning ourselves as a local leadership, but it's for all subnational inputs for Paris Agreement stocktake at the global level. We are hoping this session will focus on 3 areas. What is your own commitment? How much you have advanced on that? What is your relation to your national commitments and disease, and how they address climate justice? So that every city hall then address this and then report this information back to the UNFCCC via LGMA. In that regard, we have a toolkit ready available. We will be calling for stocktake support. Unfortunately, the current stocktakes are always in the global north. We want more from the global south, especially Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And with the collaboration we are in the process with the Bloomberg funding, there will be a very relatively humble financial support for those who would like to convene such stock takes, or that we would like to encourage them to be benefiting from this resource. And in order to support all this process, we will have a webinar on the 12th of September. With this, I'd like to give a break. I can take some breath myself. I know my colleague Ingrid is patiently waiting for us. I wished I could have opened the door for Q&A, but I think let's also hear from Ingrid a bit, and then let's get input from all the audience of this webinar. I hope you would agree with me. And Ingrid, I'm stopping to share my screen and giving you back the floor. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Yunus. And let me just share screen, and I hope everybody can see it. Hang on, let me just get it. There you are. All right, so I'm going to just focus mostly on the 7th GEF Assembly. But before I do that, I just wanted to quickly share the following information. Some of you may already have seen this. It was issued, the notification by the CBD Secretariat at the end of July, informing observers and parties that the Republic of Turkey had withdrawn its decision to host and preside over the 16th Conference of Parties due to the situation that had been created by the series of earthquakes. So at the moment, there is no new venue decided yet. I know that there are several countries that the Secretariat and the Bureau are engaging with, but it hasn't been formalized yet, and there's no final decision. However, it looks like the dates will still be more or less the same. So that is sort of October, second half of October, early November, or close to that in 2024. And as soon as we have further information, we will share that as well with the LGMA. So the 7th GEF Assembly, my feedback here is going to focus just looking at it from a biodiversity perspective, which I covered there. And I think it was a very momentous, very important assembly for biodiversity. This is the first time that the parties and the ministers had got together after the landmark COP16, where we got the new framework, the Global Biodiversity Framework. And it took place last week in Vancouver. And I think the most important thing, the big news on everybody's minds was, of course, the decision that had been taken already at COP16 that there needed to be established a new fund earmarked specifically for the Global Biodiversity Framework. The decision to establish the fund had been taken by the GEF Council about 3 or so weeks before, and it was then ratified on the 24th of August at the GEF Assembly. That's the good news. The bad news is that the fund is not able to be quite launched yet, in the sense that so far only 2 countries, donor countries, have made contributions. The biggest being from Canada. They announced at GEF that they were contributing 200 million Canadian dollars to the GBFF, as it is known. And the UK also pledged an initial contribution of £10 million. So at the moment, there's a lot of very strong calls and lobbying amongst other major donors, countries, to also make their contributions. And in practice, there's a shortfall of around 40 million. So clearly, because this needs to be operationalized, this GBFF needs to be operationalized before COP16, there's going to be quite a lot of hard work in that respect. And then the other thing that I just wanted to talk about, so at the GEF, there were a lot of obviously plenaries, a lot of talk around addressing the funding gap, both in respect of biodiversity and climate, and different sort of modalities to do this. There was also talk around looking at the process and the procedures and the issues of access around GEF, and how to streamline this, particularly to make it more accessible. At GEF, there was a huge emphasis on Indigenous peoples and local communities, as well as on the gender aspect. But the GEF CEO made it clear in many of the sessions where he was addressing the parties and the observers, that the call to streamline and to improve and to enhance the efficiency and the accessibility of the GEF was an open call. Then of the thematic sessions, there were quite a lot that dealt with, obviously, with biodiversity. There was an important one around building cities for planet and people, and there was another one on cities. So there was a very good balance of sessions and side events and thematic roundtables. And then there was also the Global Biodiversity Framework Pavilion, which was hosted by the CBD Secretariat. You can see there on the screen, I've got the sort of thematic areas that they covered. A lot of talk around implementation of the new Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And then, of course, also a lot of emphasis on the whole issue of the funding of the implementation of the framework. And they also launched the sort of new visual identity and messaging around the GBF to make it less technical and more understandable and palatable for the man and the woman on the street. There were several networking sessions. Some of them were very specific, but there were 2 that were where the LGMA was involved. So the one was for all non-state actors, where there was an opportunity to engage with the Secretariat around expectations in terms of implementation and funding. And then there was a bilateral between the Secretariat and LGMA representatives, where we talked specifically, obviously, about the funding issue, but also around the road towards the next COP and what are the sorts of things that we were wanting to focus on. And I think the primary thing there is going to be the opportunity to report on progress over the past 2 years, from COP15 to the parties, specifically by cities and regional governments. And then there was also a closed ministerial on nature that had been held on the 23rd of August. And one of the things that came out of this was the ministers agreed to form a nature champions network amongst the ministerial level. And then just quickly, a reminder, as part of ICLEI, together with our partners, Regions 4, CBD Secretariat, UNEP, IUCN, to mobilize our constituency towards COP16. We have the third of our webinar series coming up on the 7th of September. And this time we're going to be talking about scaling up finance for biodiversity. And I have the registration link at the bottom. I will put it in the chat box again. And that's all. Thanks from me. Thank you. Back to you, Eunice.
Thank you, Ingrid. Thanks and congratulations, and especially thanks for this update on the GEF Assembly. Those who are familiar, maybe let's remember, GEF is an instrument that is designed to support the Rio Conventions, particularly biodiversity, climate change, desertification, and later on there are some of those like Montreal Protocol or also Minamata Convention. Over the past couple of years, GEF also said that there is a need for an integrated approach because in some cases these Rio Conventions are not necessarily the cause but the results of some of those things that are not done appropriately. And one of those integrated programs was CITI, an integrated program for CITI. So that's where we have been also involved. We have been contributing in shaping of this integrated program together with World Bank and UNEP. It is being implemented by several LGMA partners like ICLEI, C40RRI, and the latest version of this is the Urban Shift as the brand that is involved in the GEF 8. There will also hopefully be a new program for that, and currently GEF 7 is currently led by Urban Shift. So that is giving us the opportunity that we have both entry doors through UNFCCC or climate process, biodiversity process, and it's good to have our own action plan there, as Ingrid mentioned, at Target 12. We hope this will also benefit that those cities who would wish to comply with Target 12 could also receive funding through this GEF fund for the new biodiversity framework, so that urban action and urban climate and urban nature action is also getting more money for our members, and then they could be now prepared to alert that they should prepare their applications for such mechanisms. That is a new channel of funding for them. I think that is the key message we should convey, and that's the advantage, or that's the reason why we're making all this advocacy, to bring benefits to our members and help the implementation of the global process. So once again, well done. And we can also expect to hear updates from our colleagues who are running the Urban Shift in days ahead. We know 6 minutes left. I would be very happy that I don't start again from the presentation, but rather if there are any feedbacks, complementary points, points that would be good to be shared by all of our colleagues. I see in the chat box something is coming, probably. There was a link to the webinars. I think Laura shared that. Laura shared the Nature Biodiversity webinar series on 7th of September. That's great. So, but of course, if there's no need, we can always give a couple of minutes back to people's agenda so that they can enjoy with their refreshments. But just let's be coming back to this part for everyone to be reminding themselves of the 2 important slides that for this webinar as our takeaways from this meeting. First slide, we have a proliferation of subnational advocacy channels. This is all supporting our LGMA advocacy. They are not necessarily led by LGMA, but the cause or the result, which is to strengthen multi-level action, to strengthen urbanization, and to strengthen engagement of local governments in the climate action is the ultimate goal, and all these are contributing to this. Therefore, we are very happy that those mechanisms, we are in touch, we are involved, so that we are making sure all of them are effectively synergized. And among them, in the next couple of days, there will be a very important effort from the presidency, COP28 presidency, and Bloomberg Philanthropies, so that these processes can all be supported. And we reached to COP28 with a powerful delegation, with a powerful campaign or a call for nations that when they close the first phase of the Paris Agreement with this global stocktake, when they start to prepare their new climate plans and to submit it in Brazil 2 years later, they announce that they do this through multi-level collaboration and that they use urbanization as an important a mechanism. So that's our basic expectation and hope. The second one, obviously, September, October will be extremely busy, one of the busiest period of this year, especially the regional climate weeks, urban forums, LGMA stocktakes, and several UNFCCC events, starting with the Climate Week in Africa next week, with track 2 on the 6th of September kicking off. New York City Climate Week will be important agenda for us, and we will make sure the stocktakes are diversified, more diverse regions are convening this at the city halls. There's regional government on board, local governments on board, that they turn this as an opportunity to bring COP to the communities and the messages from these communities back to the UNFCCC, so that the global stocktake is better informed. This is our journey in the next 100 days. I wish you all a success. I wish you all strength. Take deep breath and be aware that we are advancing in the right direction, but our challenge is that we have to run faster and we have to run all together if we really want to make a change. And hopefully our efforts will all help us to do that. With this, I thank you all for your participation, interest, and you will receive the links tomorrow. We will have this 4 p.m. today, next webinar. Our bulletin will be released tomorrow, and let's connect for other agenda items in the coming days. Bye-bye.
Thank you.